Welcome, welcome, welcome to Media History for a Thursday afternoon. And today we're going to talk about the Civil War. And the media made a very big difference, and the media made a very big difference right here. Now, just a reminder, we have an essay due on unintended consequences due tomorrow afternoon. Unintended consequences mean that, you made a media for communication, but other things happened. Like with the telegraph. Other things happened, the night shift. So a very good essay. Someone did many biographies of women who got jobs in the city and had careers because of the telegraph. I thought that was a very good and original approach. So indeed, did Samuel Morse think that women would be moving to the city and get jobs? No. Did he think that there would be the night shift? No. Those are unintended consequences. A lot of people are doing the cell phone, and certainly a lot of unintended consequences. The thing is, what a lot of people are doing, you're doing a laundry list of several things. Cyberbullying, addiction, distracted driving. Do one and really develop that and get some background on one thing rather than three. So that's the one thing I'm seeing. So that's kind of what's going on. So anyway, I appreciate it. I'll be reading until probably tomorrow afternoon. Then I will go get civilized with some friends. And so I may be incommunicado, but I will be reading through tomorrow and I'll get drafts back quickly.
At what time will the essay be due tomorrow?
Midnight.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Right. Anyway, on the Civil War, the media made a lot of difference because of the new technologies we've already covered. The photograph brought the war to your home. And what did they see? Dead bodies and injured people. The telegraph, you got your news instantly. The high-speed press, a lot of people reading about the news. And what happened in the North, because they had more population density, more readers, you had, and the whole idea of the government being a unified country, you had people throughout the North reading the same information. The South, the idea was states' rights. So each state had different communications, different newspapers. People in Texas weren't reading newspapers in Georgia, but people in Maine were reading about newspapers in Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. So that was a difference. Just back from the printing press, from Gutenberg, the media helps unify a nation. And I'll tell you something now, because this is very relevant today. I want this one. Hello. I want the PBS one. I hate when this happens. I'm going so well, and then something goofy gets in the way. There it is. Obviously, the Gettysburg Address was a big deal, but the way it was in the media made a difference, and you'll see.
Sir, we're watching you right now.
Yeah, we can't see it.
The Civil War was fought in 10,000 places.
Okay.
At Big Bend, Big Sandy, and the Big...
Okay. Let's see. Are we sharing the screen?
No.
Ah, that's why we're not sharing the screen. Okay. Here it is now.
Sunflower River.
Okay.
From Bunker Hill...
You can see it now.
The Civil War was fought in 10,000 places. At Big Bend, Big Sandy, and the Big Sunflower River. From Bunker Hill, West Virginia, and Blue Springs, Tennessee, and Cairo, Illinois, to Golgotha Church, Georgia, and Christiansburg, Kentucky. At Citrus Point on the Cimarron River, and along Cowskin Bottom. At Pebbly Run and La Glorieta Pass, and Gettysburg.
I think if I had my choice of all the moments to be present at in that war period, it would be at Gettysburg during Lincoln's delivery of his speech. Maybe to have seen him craft those beautiful words, his marvelous healing words, and then deliver them. They were for everyone for all time. They subsumed the entire war and all in it. It showed his compassion for everyone, his love for his people. That's where I'd like to be.
On November 19th, Lincoln traveled to Gettysburg to dedicate the new Union Cemetery. The featured speaker was Edward Everett of Massachusetts, a diplomat, clergyman, and celebrated orator. The president had been invited almost as an afterthought to offer a few appropriate remarks. Everett spoke for not quite 2 hours. Then Lincoln rose. The local photographer took his time focusing. Presumably, the president could be counted on to go on for a while. But he spoke just 269 words. He started off by reminding his audience that just 87 years had passed since the founding of the nation. And then he went on to embolden the Union cause with some of the most stirring words ever spoken. Lincoln was heading back to his seat before the photographer could open the shutter.
He felt that he had failed, that it was a poor speech, that people didn't like it. It was so brief, less than 2 minutes. He felt that he had failed. Lehman, his friend Ward Lehman, was sitting next to him on the stand. When he sat down, there was just a sprinkling of applause. And he said, "Lehman, that speech won't scowl. That's what you say about a plow in the prairies when the mud doesn't come off it."
The cheek of every American must tingle with shame as he reads the silly, flat, dishwatery utterances of the man who has to be pointed out to intelligent foreigners as the President of the United States. Chicago Times.
Dear Mr. President, I should be glad if I could flatter myself that I came as near to the central idea of the occasion in 2 hours as you did in 2 minutes. Edward Everett.
Fourscore and 7
Okay.
years ago.
So he gave this speech. He didn't think it was that much. What does the media have to do with it becoming a big deal? Because it is central. Any ideas? 293 words. Became a big deal because it was only 293 words in 2 minutes. It fit into a newspaper column. Everybody can read it. Edward Everett went on for 2 hours. Would you read the transcript of a 2-hour speech? I wouldn't. But I would read a 6-inch story in the newspaper. And when people read it, it made a difference. That speech is on the Lincoln Memorial. It is on monuments. It is etched in our history. Why? Because it looked good in print and we can hear it now. That's why, because it looks good in the media. And I want you to listen to it because it is very, very, very relevant to our current situation. And I don't care if you're liberal, conservative, or whatever. Listen.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met here on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of it as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that their nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they have thus far so nobly carried on. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they here gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
See, a couple of things in that. All men, and we can certainly say all people now, are created equal. Black, white, immigrant, born here. We are all equal in this nation. Nobody's better than anybody else. Second, that these people, and you saw the graveyards just like the one behind campus, gave this lives for the government, for the idea that our government is for the people. It is our government. And when you are fighting the government, you're fighting America, you're fighting us, you're fighting ourselves. The government's not perfect, and it's inefficient, and all the criticisms are right. But it is about the idea of our government and making, as the Constitution says, making it more perfect. And that's what we're trying to do. And again, conservative or liberal, we are very divided, and now is the time for you to have a voice in that. So vote. Anyway, okay, that's my commercial, but it's relevant right now. Again, the two messages: everyone is created equal. Nobody's better than anybody else. Nobody's superior to anybody else. And it's about making a government that works. Not just the nation, the government. Anyway, all right, getting off the soapbox. Meanwhile, a lot of that stuff happened here. I think this one shows the Civil War. Yes, right here.
After the Battle of Chickamauga, the Union Army of the Cumberland retreats to Chattanooga. Confederates under Braxton.
Okay, what happened? The Confederates, and we'll talk about what happens to the media, why the media is involved. Well, the media shows it here. What happened is the Union, here's downtown Chattanooga. They were bottled up and they were surrounded by the Confederates, and the Confederates tried to storm them out. At Missionary Ridge, they tried to break out. Second biggest thing of the Battle of the War, the Union was driven back. But Braxton Bragg, the Confederate commander, did not chase them back. He let them live. Arguably a mistake.
Braxton Bragg pursue and take position on the heights surrounding the city, presenting a formidable obstacle to the Union Army and preventing all but the tiniest trickle of supplies from entering the city.
Yep.
The situation remains unchanged for an entire month. So by the end of October 1863, Bragg's Confederates are no closer to destroying the army they had whipped him up.
Yep, it was a standoff. They were the Union was surrounded, and the Confederates did not chase them down.
Earlier, and the Union Army of the Cumberland, now under General George Thomas, is stuck inside Chattanooga, and even though they have the will to fight, they lack the physical means to break out of the city. However, Chattanooga and the railroads that converge there are essential to the Union war effort, and Abraham Lincoln is ready to move heaven and earth to ensure that the city not only stays in Union hands, but serves as a base of operations for future offensives into the Confederate heartland. Union reinforcements moved to Chattanooga in the form of the Union Army of the Tennessee, the Victors of Vicksburg, under the command of William T. Sherman, and 4 divisions of the Army of the Potomac, fresh from their victory at Gettysburg, under the command of Joseph Hooker. But perhaps more importantly, Ulysses S. Grant has been promoted to command all of the Western armies of the United States. Grant himself will oversee the relief effort at Chattanooga. He arrives cold, wet, but ready to work. Now, before Grant can lift the siege, he must first bring supplies to the starving Army of the Cumberland. Fortunately, when he arrives, one of his generals, William F. Smith, has a plan to float boats down the Tennessee River to establish a bridgehead on the southern side and
What does this have to do with the media and the telegraph? I'll tell you. Grant originally was he wasn't artillery, he wasn't infantry, he wasn't he wasn't cavalry. He was a supply sergeant. He was a supply officer. He knew supply chains. He knew how to move stuff around. You saw that they had people coming in from Virginia, people coming in from Vicksburg in Mississippi. He's coordinating via telegraph all of these supplies and armies. The Confederates, who did not have that communication savvy, were just sitting and watching. That's where the media made a difference.
Connect with the Army of the Potomac units that are arriving. The plan is nuts and rife with danger, but Grant is anxious to take action and greenlights the project. On the night of October 27, 1863, federal troops under the command of William Babcock Hazen float down the Tennessee River, establish a bridgehead at Brown's Ferry, and link up with Hooker's men the next morning. Bragg sees this and wants to stop the relief effort, but James Longstreet's half-hearted attempt to break the Union supply line at Wauhatchie is beaten back in the middle of the night of October 28th. In 3 days, Grant has already begun to unravel the month-long siege of Chattanooga, but Bragg and his generals are too busy arguing with one another to do anything about it. In the face of their inaction, Grant's army grows stronger, it's resupplied, and is ready to take the initiative. On November 23, 1863, Union troops seize high ground called Orchard Knob. The next morning, Hooker's men sweep the Confederates off of Lookout Mountain in a mythical engagement known as the Battle Above the Clouds. On November 25th, Union troops set...
He's at the Craven's house, which is on Lookout Mountain, where a lot of that stuff happened. Grant wasn't that impressed.
their sights on Missionary Ridge, the last Confederate stronghold. Sherman will attack from the north, Hooker will sweep up from the south, and the Army of the Cumberland will make a demonstration against the base of Missionary Ridge. But these Cumberland men, who've been sitting besieged in Chattanooga for 2 months, have ideas of their own. They launch their own attack, not just a demonstration, but a full-fledged assault up the side of Missionary Ridge, sweeping the Confederates off in confusion. Grant's pursuit is stopped at Ringgold Gap on November 27th by a potent rearguard action led by Patrick Cleburne, but the damage has already been done. With Chattanooga firmly in Union hands and Grant's star on its way to its zenith, the stage is set for 1864, and the gateway to the South is wide open.
Yep, that's one reason why this was so important. Basically, they followed Route 75, the Dixie Highway. They opened up, well, Route 24, the Gap and Missionary Ridge, right where Route 24 goes through, that's where the Union Army spilled through. And Sherman, who was right here, started his march to the sea right here. So this was a big deal. Just give you a sense, you're surrounded by all of this. And the best memorial I could think of is the graveyard. One other communication thing.
Last one.
Skip adds this, please.
Will become Lincoln's nerve center in this war. And at its heart, a simple device that will transform how this war is fought and won. The telegraph.
See, we had troops bringing supplies in from Mississippi. You had reinforcements coming down the river from Virginia into Knoxville. How do you coordinate all of these people? Right here. And who's moving all of these armies? The man himself.
The invention of Morse code in 1844 turns the telegraph into America's first tool of mass communication. Quickly encoded, the basic system of dots and dashes, sealed for brief messages. Like Twitter today, it needs just seconds to send them and transcribe them. Where messengers previously took days, on horseback, over hundreds of miles, and across every kind of terrain. Now, the country's 50,000-mile telegraph network, its communication is almost instantaneous. As telegraph poles snake out alongside the railroad lines, this vast country begins to shrink. It will transform the nature of this war, as information and decisions can flow backwards and forwards at lightning speed.
It became kind of the early version of email. Suddenly it was possible to get a message to somebody from St. Louis, to get a message to New York in a shockingly short amount of time.
Lincoln immediately realizes the telegraph's potential as a weapon of war. He insists on the installation of telegraph lines directly into the War Department. He quickly acts to place all telegraph facilities in the Union under military control.
Can you imagine if the president did that today? If the president took over Twitter and Facebook and TikTok?
Oh God, the country would go ballistic.
Well, and this is and this is one of the problems of modern democracy. Lincoln was arguably a dictator. He eliminated the writ of habeas corpus. He put people in jail without charging them. But on the other hand, he won the war. He, again, Depends on how you look at history. But he took over all the communications.
The telegraph office becomes the central hub of Lincoln's war operation, his command and control center. He even takes to sleeping here at busy times. The telegraph office manager, David Homer Bates, describes how Lincoln obsesses over every scrap of news from the front, sometimes reading dispatches word by word as they are deciphered.
Lincoln's habit was to go immediately to the drawer each time he came into our room and read over the telegrams, beginning at the top until he came to the one he had seen on his previous visit.
The North Telegraph Network spreads its tentacles far and wide, sucking information back to Lincoln and his commanders in Washington.
And guess where that is? We're sitting there.
It gives him a vast strategic overview, providing him an unrivaled insight into his commander's tactical thinking.
Bottom line, you get the point. Lincoln is using communications to coordinate the war effort, move armies all over from the Mississippi River to the Atlantic. The Confederates don't have that sort of network, and they don't have that sort of ability. The one Confederate who understood this and kept breaking the train lines and the telegraph lines was Nathan Bedford Forrest, which is why he is largely remembered, because he was a modern thinker for the Confederates. But again, war is now about communication as much as anything now. And that's one of the reasons why the North won, because of telecommunication. Think about it. Next week, we go after the war. And again, we're sitting right in the middle of it. You saw a lot of the veterans. Those guys were right here. So, I mean, we're in a very important area, and that's a big part of it. Anyway, any other questions on the assignment? Any other things going on?
Do you know, would you have any recommendations as to where we can, or what kind of keywords we can use to search up topics?
You know, keywords, unintended consequences of media.
Okay.
So honest, would be fine. Media effects. Because when you do media effects, you're not going to read about communication technology. You'll see the effects of the psychology and other, media and sociology. So those sorts of things.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, the phone would work. The thing is, someone says phone. Yes, what kind of phone? Cell phone? If you do cell phone, there's lots of effects. Do one. If you do the old-fashioned Alexander Graham Bell telephone, that's different. So again, when I said phone, I'll say, yes, but one effect, one consequence, please. Too many people, and this is why this is a good assignment, are going just too broad. You do the phone and you give me a laundry list of, cyberbullying, sexting, addiction, distracted driving. Each of those is a separate essay. That's 4 essays, that's not one. So that's fine. When I say phone, do we mean this phone? Or do you mean an old style telephone? See, we need to be specific on these things, on this class or any.
So what about like vaporizers or cigarettes?
Cigarettes aren't media. Nope. It's a media class. Other ideas while we're at it. Okay. Think about it. You can email.
Would the entertainment?
What about what?
Hold on. Would the entertainment industry kind of be?
Entertainment industry includes movies, TVs.
What if I did like specific
Like what?
Like how social media has become a full-time job now? Would that be an undetermined?
Social media and how has social media changed our employment?
There's so many jobs created from it. Yeah.
There you go. Unintended consequences. Yeah, positive thing. Sure.
Is that a good thing?
Social media and the job market. See how we went from entertainment to something narrow and doable? There you go. Social media and the job market. That's workable.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Others.
What about Netflix, like how there used to be DVDs, like you got DVDs sent in the mail? What if you talked about how they are now basically they created streaming services just online?
Yes.
What
Okay. Now, streaming service, how streaming services have affected what? Film production, economics. Choose one area under streaming services. Has that affected theaters? Or give me a little bit of a list. Yes, streaming services, how have they affected, again, the movie industry, acting, theaters, our own habits? Choose one narrow area of streaming. Has that made us more obese because we're not going out to the movies and eating popcorn? How does streaming affected our health? How has streaming affected the movie business? So yes, definitely. Ooh, famous movie, work, or song. Sure. Something, how has the unintended consequence of, some, or a movement, sure, has that caused, awareness increasing, decrease and increase in crime? Yeah. A famous movie or song, yes. Has that really affected people? So yeah.
Could you talk about how that old Christmas song, "Baby It's Cold Outside," how there's that whole controversy about how it's I guess
sexual and perhaps abusive. Now that's obviously an unintended interpretation. Has that affected society? That's just, is that an unintended, that's an unintended interpretation, but is that a consequence? Has that song influenced anybody? The fact that it's creepy, okay, it was okay, now it's creepy. We can find lots of things. So probably not the best. See, I have to think these things out loud. Songs that have changed, everything. Hey, when the Beatles went on Ed Sullivan and started the British invasion and started the Elvis song. Elvis, here's one, Elvis and Hound Dog, which was a blues song by Big Mama Thornton. And we'll talk about that. And he was a white person who sang like a blues woman. And it's a blues song about a guy who cheats. Ain't nothing but a hound dog. So yes, that was a song that brought Black culture into the mainstream. So yeah, Elvis and Hound Dog would be a real good example of a song that made a difference. So yeah, those sorts of things. So yeah, I mean, again, I like that you're thinking about these things. Other stuff. Good. I like that you're thinking. I'll bounce ideas and drafts for the next day and a half. So yeah, love what you guys are doing. I appreciate it. Creative approaches are appreciated. Anything else going on? Lovely day out. Have a fine, fine day.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.